So yeah, vibe coding basics. Like, how do you build prototypes in minutes with AI? And what are all these tools, and how can I use them? So firstly, it's a great time to build. Like, there's been a lot of really exciting developments over the last, I'd say, like 9 to 12 months that mean that you can um, build, working products that you can launch on the internet. Other people can use them in a matter of minutes. Um, these are some things that have been built. I built this kind of movie genre explorer, which I'll show you in just a moment. So I'll kind of skip over that one. These are a couple of things that people have built on the Hustle Badger Build with AI course. So within a couple of weeks of kind of learning these tools, they've picked up these. So you'll see this is a calorie tracker that someone built so they could track their personal calorie intake because they didn't like any of the ones they could find on the App Store. This is someone who built, on the right-hand side, you can see Wine GPT, which is very much like Vivino, actually. So you kind of scan wine labels and it will give you a recommendation of what food to pair them with. And similarly, they built that in a week or two, playing around with some of these tools. Just to give you an idea, again, I'm going to share something else actually. Ooh. So I'm going to show you my movie tracker. I'm going to hope that you can see this if you give me a moment. I'm just tracking. Can you see the movie Genre Explorer full screen here? Yes,
Yeah.
someone give you a nod. Yeah, great. So this is something I built in. I'm just going to demo a couple of these because they're quite fun. Just give you an idea of what you can build. This took me about 2.5 hours. I wanted something that would recommend me movies because I didn't know what to watch. Um, you select the genre. Um, that's all fairly straightforward. You select the era. The era is relative to my age. So classics are things that were made before I was born. Nostalgia is stuff that was made between when I was born and when I was 18. Modern films is anything from 18 to a couple of years ago, and fresh is like within the last couple of years because I'm a parent, and fresh has a pretty big window for me on movies right now. And you can see you do that, it picks up some movies. I only want to see movies that have at least 80%, 70, 80% on IMDb. So you can see that I don't care about most movies. It's only going to show me the good ones. It's going to tell me what genres they're in, and I can play the I don't know if you can see that pop up, but you can play the trailer like right there because that's really how I select my movies. So this whole thing, like I said, I think it took me 2.5 hours, of which an hour was kind of doing the styling. Kind of like one example of something you can build. This is something that again, someone on one of our courses built. So he just had a child, and he wanted a make a little app that told his mum how to, or his mother-in-law how to look after their child if they were going to hand it over for babysitting. And so you can create your digital twin here. You can do that by actually talking into the app or by going into the settings and kind of like filling it all in here. And then once you've done that, um, basically you can give it access. He's actually made this premium so that he's integrated with Stripe. So you can subscribe. It's got, I think this will even kind of like pop up the Stripe details. So you can subscribe. It's got a little Stripe thing. He built all that, and all the sign in and sign outs done with Google. So this is kind of actually not just a kind of fairly basic site like mine, but it's actually like plugging into a bunch of these third-party services. And again, it's something that he thought would be useful so that he could tell his mother-in-law really easily like what the feeding schedule is right now, what the sleep schedule is, what the favorite songs are that help get their child to sleep, and all that sort of stuff. I'll just show you one more of these. Um, let's show you this one. So this is a household cleaning tasks app, again, that someone built in a couple of hours. So it tracks all the different tasks that they need to keep their house neat and tidy. Again, they've got children. It's a bit of a theme here. So they've got adult tasks, they've got kids tasks. You can add things like piano practice, and it has a little timer. They can play a little song from Spotify or a playlist while they're doing their tasks. And then as you mark them off, they'll kind of get tracked so that you can see that you're getting your household chores done. And the lady who built this was like, this has been fantastic. My child is now actually doing things around the house just because she wants to kind of tick them off. Um, so the if only for a few days, like the novelty there is definitely working. So you see, even if you're just playing around with, you know, building your own personal software, like you can build some like pretty cool stuff. Uh, you know, like stuff that interests you anyway within just a few hours, really. You can also clone kind of some common sites incredibly easily. So this is me playing around in Replit, and you can see here I've kind of put in make me a Wikipedia clone, so big prompt, and this is what it looks like. And you can see it looks pretty much like Wikipedia. Now, obviously, it doesn't have all the content of Wikipedia. Like Wikipedia is not a complex site to build; it's all in the content. But even so, you can see the look and feel is very much there, and it created like 2 or 3 pages that you could click through. I actually did this as a test because I wanted to show you people how you could build Stripe integrations really easily. And so the next thing I wanted to do was build like a little donor banner at the top. And you can see here, I basically said um, it was 2 more prompts to say, can you add a donate button? And it built it and connected to Stripe. And I think I had to change the amounts that it was offering up because it was I didn't like the amounts it was defaulting to, $5, $10, donate $20, whatever it is. So those two additional prompts then gave me this donate button at the top of the page. And this is connected to Stripe. This will take process like real money if you click onto it. And this, again, I could deploy to the internet. No one's going to, it won't have Wikipedia's URL. It'll have my kind of replit dot Wikipedia clone, whatever URL. But again, just quite impressive what you can build in a matter of moments. That said, there are limits. And generally, if you're going to be building these things, you'll find that the first sort of 70% is, a lot of fun, very easy. You get there in moments. You're like, oh, this is amazing. Look at what I can build. And then you'll notice that there's a few bugs you just want to iron out, and that shouldn't be a problem. Actually, kind of, you'll quite quickly find ironing out some of the major bugs is like quite a lot of work and quite frustrating. And then you'll just get to a stage where there is no way you are going to resolve those bugs unless you kind of are actually doing proper coding and coding and you're kind of really spending an awful lot of time getting the details right. So these are very strong for prototyping and simple personal software that you don't mind being a bit buggy, quite difficult if you're looking to get exact results. Before I go any further, I think it's going to be useful just to kind of name our terms a little bit and help you navigate around the space a bit. So I like to think of in this kind of vibe coding space, there are like 4 kind of big buckets of tools that you may come across. Now, this is obviously evolving, weekly, daily. So this isn't meant to be an exhaustive list. This is more meant to kind of help you understand the categories as I understand them, so that when you see a tool, you can be like, oh yeah, it's like one of these things. So top left, general AIs, the kind of the foundational LLMs, Claude, ChatGPT, Grok. You're probably using these daily. You ask them general questions. You ask them to write you documents. In this context, when you get into vibe coding, they are invaluable for helping you to debug. And you're basically always going to be kind of pinging backwards and forwards between like one of the other tools and your general LLM to say like, hey, what do I do next? Talk me through this. Provide me some, a checklist or a list of steps to do. The next set of tools I would call out are the no-code tools. So if you've used Zapier or you know what Zapier looks like, then that is very much in this class. But increasingly, you're seeing tools like Relay, N8N, Gumloop. There's a whole other bunch of tools in this area. So it's very much drag and drop. And what they allow you to do is kind of connect to a bunch of other services that have APIs like Slack and Google Docs and just about anything else you can remember, and create simple workflows or not so simple workflows that do things for you. So every time you get an email through your B2B contact form on your website, you also get a Slack notification to your sales channel saying like, hey, check your emails, answer this. Be like, that would be a very, very simple workflow. And the difference that you're now getting, which Zapier has built in, but has sort of meant that Zapier is probably not the default company to go to anymore, is that you can now put AI steps in. So those are our steps which would then call one of these models. So you're basically saying, hey, when I get an email in my B2B form, then look at that company, do some research on it, tell me against this kind of, list of benefits that we offer and this list of products, what I should email them back and how I should pitch them a meeting. And then draft that email for me and then stick it as a draft in my inbox ready to go. And then Slack me and tell me to review the message and send it. So you can start doing much more complicated things because you can get this sort of non-deterministic output using AI steps. And you can chain those together to make agents. Well, we're going to talk about quite a lot of these low-code tools. I'd probably call these prototyping tools now, actually. So these are things like your Lovables, your Replits, Bolt, V0, everything in that genre where you, as you saw in the previous slides, you put in a quick prompt and you're going to get back a website or a mock-up, clickable mock-up, and then you can deploy that to the internet so other people can click around on it as well. So these are sort of like very, very fun and do that kind of, they do the 70% of, I've got an idea, I want to see what it looks like as a website. They will build that for you very quickly. They will also get stuck quite quickly, I would say. So within a few hours of kind of building the same thing in a prototyping tool, if you're trying to make it actually functional, you're going to start coming up with bugs. It's going to start, duplicating to code or deleting code, and you're going to have to graduate to an IDE, so an integrated development environment. This is a tool that a kind of professional developer would use if they are writing code on a live commercial site. So you've got things like Cursor, Windsurf, GitHub Copilot, ChatGPT's Codex would be in this category, right? So these give you much more granular control. They're much more technical, but you're still writing a prompt and it's outputting code. And then you can, that is real code that you can use, right? So these just give you a bit more fine-grained control, basically, and make it easier to debug. And so if you're really building something that you want to deploy and be live for an extended period, not just for you, you're unlikely to get there just with these prototyping tools in the top right. You're going to have to kind of transition to an IDE at some point. As I said, we're going to kind of concentrate on the prototyping tools and using those. Now, you're probably all madly screenshotting this page. We are going to send you the recording, as I promised. This may already be out of date because I did it all of 5 or 6 weeks ago. What I really wanted to show with this chart is like there's a bunch of things here that you can see down the left-hand side, all the different kind of things that make it easier to build stuff like, can you edit the code directly? Can you publish to the internet? Is there secure credential storage? And maybe half these things you don't even really understand like whether they're important or not until you start playing around with. What's really obvious is that firstly, I've put Cursor on here not to show how similar it is, but to show that it's fundamentally different, right? So it won't let you one-click deploy to the internet. It doesn't have a database. It doesn't have secure credential storage. Last time I checked, that's not its focus. Its focus is doing other stuff, right? It's kind of like it has terminal access and it, lets you select which files you're going to edit. All of these prototyping tools in the middle, they've got more or less the same functionality, and the switching costs between them are basically zero. So if you build something in Replit, you can rebuild it in any one of these other codes in a matter of hours. And you could even upload your code to GitHub and then pull it down into one of these other tools. So you didn't have to, rebuild it. So yeah, if you're thinking, I kind of put this on there because very often when I speak to people, their first question is, but which tool do I use? Which is the best one? I'm like, they're all the same. Do not worry about this. Whichever one has appeared in your social media feed the most and all your mates seem to be using, that is the right answer. Just go with whatever your heart tells you. If you really, really pushed me, I would say use Replit if you want to build something that is actually going to be functional, as like it's actually going to be like a working website for a extended period, and probably go for V0 if you want something that is just going to be a clickable prototype, because it's very, very slightly easier to edit the UI. But honestly, if you've heard a lot of people use Lovable. Like there is going to be marginal difference between these. And we often I'm going to talk a lot about mention our course because just we've trained a bunch of people how to use these tools now, and we always ask them because it changes every few weeks, like which tools they've tried and which ones they like. um you know we During the course, one of the things we get people to do is build with multiple tools so that they understand where these are similar and where these are different, and then they can make up their personal preference. So something that's quite a good way of approaching your first kind of couple of hours with these tools, if you haven't done that yet, is open like 2 or 3 tabs, like one for each of these tools, have the same prompt, build the same thing like at the same time. So just flick between the tabs, give them all the same prompt because they run in the cloud. So you can do that and then see what the output is and see how you like building them. You'll notice that the layout of the screens are very, very similar, and you can see which ones kind of work for you. A few other tips to get you going. So when people dive into vibe coding, I'm going to say like vibe coding. How would I define vibe coding? I mean, I'm just talking about building with these tools, right? And people will have kind of slightly different definitions of vibe coding from I never touch the keyboard type of thing, and I only just chat through voice to these tools, through to I just use AI support when I'm doing regular coding. I mean, I'm talking about the use of these tools. When you start digging into these tools, a lot of people do it because they've got like some amazing product that they've been thinking about at the back of their mind for the last 3 years, and they're just convinced it's going to make them a millionaire, and they just can't wait to get started on it and building, start their new life as an entrepreneur. Great. I would just hold off like 1 or 2 weeks before you start that project, because what you will learn in the first couple of weeks of using these tools will mean that you go much, much faster when you actually decide to start your magnum opus project, as it were. So start with a kind of hello world project, something very, very basic, just so you learn the tools. And then once you feel like you understand the tools, then go on to build the stuff that really gets you excited. If you have no ideas of very basic things to build, they all have suggestions, firstly, like when you load them up, because that's obviously one of the things that they've solved for. So you'll have a bunch of suggestions like in the tool, if you're using Lovable or whatever. But I would build like your favorite retro game, Snake, Asteroids, Sudoku. Like they will build like any kind of like simple game, Space Invaders, pretty much like one shot, very, very simple. Very, very simple prompt. Build your own personal weather app. Everyone's got a weather app, but it's always slightly wrong and doesn't quite show you the things that you want. So build your own version of that, or build a to-do list. So anything like this, very, very kind of like basic projects, and you'll get a good sense of how they work, and you'll get going. As you get going, you will realize that if you want to build, digital software, effectively, you're going to have to understand the code, or rather, the more you understand the code, the further you're going to get and the faster you're going to get there. So don't think of using these tools as a way of avoiding being technical. Think of them as a way of accelerating your the way that you pick up knowledge about being technical. And yes, it's amazing that they can kind of build websites in a few minutes. What's almost more amazing is that I've seen people who play around with these tools for 2 or 3 months and are effectively at the level that a middleweight developer would be, right? As in they are, they're shipping stuff that is scalable, at least to their first few hundred or even low digit thousand customers. They could easily be charging money for if they've got their proposition right. It's that stable and performant. And they've done that from basically no coding basis or knowledge in a couple of months, just because the tools help you kind of move so quickly. And then when you are doing this thing where you're kind of moving backwards and forwards between an LLM and a AI coding tool, you're getting really immediate feedback and coaching on how to do things. So you're saying you're going to the LLM and saying like, "Hey, I want to build this thing. Talk me through what the steps are. What should I put in the prompt?" You're asking the AI tool to build it, and then when things go wrong, you're kind of copy paste. You're like screenshotting errors and you're copying them back into the LLM, saying, "Hey, what's the problem here? How do I go faster? How do I debug this? How do I stop kind of like burning credits?" And when you actually take the time to read what's coming out and kind of put some of the pieces together, you're just understanding how to code, right? Um, so as well as being able to build your own products, you find that playing around with these tools is going to make you a much more technical PM and a much better in your conversations, or much more empathetic and a useful thought partner to engineers very, very quickly, because you're going to understand the tech stack and their challenges and the development process just way more detail, even if you're kind of relatively technical but have not been coding before. So yeah, I've mentioned this a few times already. LLMs are your friend, right? They never get bored of or frustrated with answering your questions. They never judge you for asking questions that you think are really dumb. Questions that you'd feel embarrassed to ask a human, you can ask them 3 times in a row and they'll explain it in different ways. So you always want to be sort of, as I say, like bouncing back and forth, like in and out of your LLM. So they're coaching you through the process and kind of teaching you what you want to do. Really good use cases for LLMs. If you want to find an API to use, hey, I'm building a weather app. What weather APIs should I use? They will give you a list. Hey, I've decided I'm going to use this one. Can you talk me through how to set up an API key and how to integrate it? They will do that. Integrating with APIs now is really, really easy with these tools because all APIs have documentation. LLMs love documentation and can then basically read through the documentation and extract the relevant bits to tell you what you need to do. So APIs for me 6 months ago felt quite technical, quite scary, didn't really want to go near them. And now I'm like, oh yeah, API, that is super easy. I can do any API, bring it out, bring it on. They can also teach you through kind of any kinds of setup. If you're getting into the IDE world and suddenly it's going to tell you, oh, you just need to put these commands into terminal. You're like, oh, terminal, that's a text-based, UI, very scary. I could, change the foundations of my laptop here. Yes, it is scary, but also an LLM would just teach you through that. So all these sorts of things, you just get like a long way quite quickly by asking an LLM to kind of talk you through it and to teach you, tell it that you are not very technical and you want it to explain things to you as you go along. I think maybe the final point I'm going to make, when you are vibe coding, again, very, very quickly, you're going to realize that you still need to do all the thinking up front about what you actually want. Like you are still the PM. So it's really tempting just to kind of like be like, oh, I want to, make an app that tells me where their nearest ice cream truck is on a hot day. Great. And it will build something. But it's probably not going to be what you had in mind. And unless you do that thinking up front, being like, okay, actually, how is this going to work? And how is the UI going to look? And really, how am I going to interact with it? And who is this for? It is going to create something that is kind of wonderful, but is also not really what you want. So the way to get the best results possible is to do some kind of planning up front and basically, kind of killer prompts for these sorts of things. Go to ChatGPT or Claude, say like, hey, I'm going to tell you an idea. Ask me one question at a time to fill out this concept. So you've got more context. And then when it's asked you a few questions and you're getting bored of answering questions, say, write this up as a tight spec, basically, that I can pass on to developers or I can pass on to an AI tool. Absolutely killer. Worth your time coming to this webinar just for those two things if you have not done that before. So that, yeah, will just get you. And then when you've got a really detailed spec, if you stick that into your prototyping tool instead of your one-line prompt, you're going to get something that's much, much closer to what you want it to be very, very quickly. So that was a little bit of a whirlwind. So, 4 or 5 tips there to get you started. I'm not going to kind of go overboard because I also want to give you some time for questions. If you want to learn more, I've mentioned the Hustle Badger Build with AI course. This is a 4-week course. So we do a week on, automations, those no-code tools. We do basically 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks on the prototyping tools and getting the most out of those. So your Replits, your Lovables, those sorts of things. And then half a week of Cursor, basically. So just so that there's enough that if you did want to do more, you could kind of explore it further on your own. If that's of interest, click on the link, or we will send you the link. It is the thing for you if you're just looking for, especially if you're looking for that accountability, that kind of like, oh, I really want to do this, I just haven't carved out time. I really like seeing what other people have built. I want to build with people going through this at the same time. It's excellent. We always have a blast doing it. If you have no money, want to learn on your own, do not like the pressure of learning with other people, then just get on YouTube. All of these tools basically have quite well developed YouTube channels themselves, where they will teach you how to do whatever you want. And there are also a bunch of YouTubers who just kind of do walkthroughs of different skills. So if you want to kind of like self-teach yourself, then a combination of like YouTube and ChatGPT you'll get there, right? It might take you a little bit longer, but you'll get there for sure. And then some people who are chatting about building things on in AI. I've mainly selected LinkedIn people here. Obviously me, but I'm not the only person. There's a bunch of other people so who are all like very sensible and to talk about great things as well. So I'd recommend kind of giving some of them a follow too. That's it. That's all my slides. I'm gonna stop my sharing. No, I'll leave that up for a little bit. But if you have any questions, now is the time to drop them in the chat. And or stick up your hand. Okay. Susanna has been an excellent co-host here, dumping a few links in the chat. So question from Jackie, at a high level, how did you make that film choosing tool? Which tools? Where's the input form? How do you connect it to get it to show the site? Okay, so yeah, so I can talk a little bit more about that. So the mood movie one, which I'll go back to this one. This I built in Replit. So you go to replit.com. When you have to create an account, you can do that with your Google account. You will then get a little prompt box like you have on ChatGPT. And I said, hey, I'm thinking of building a movie recommendation engine that only shows me movies that get more than 70% on IMDb. That was kind of like my starting prompt, something like that. It then kind of output me something. I did a couple of follow-up prompts to change around, the cards a little bit. And then I did quite a lot of work working initially in ChatGPT to come up with a mood board. And then, I said, hey, I'm building, a movie recommendation engine. What's a good mood board for that? And we kind of talked that through and it came up with an image. So I got ChatGPT to generate me a mood board image. And then I dropped that into Replit and said, hey, can you copy the styling from this mood board into the site? And then I spent, to say, like a little bit of time kind of fiddling around to getting it work. So that was basically the process. And then from Replit, there's a deploy button. You just click on that. It takes a couple of minutes to kind of run it, and it will give you a kind of fairly obscure URL, a sub URL to Replit. So it'll be like, cheesy movie recommender.replit.app, something like that. That's basically how it works. Okay, next question. James is asking, how do you sort of bootstrap? How do you get from logging into Replit to actually having a website? So yeah, sorry, I've basically just described that with this movie one. Yeah, they will do everything from write the code for you from just a text prompt, and then it's usually just one click to deploy it to the internet. Now, if you want to kind of switch over to a custom domain, you can do that. That's a little bit more work, but that is also like not difficult at all. Yadu is asking, which programming language is being used by these tools? Should there be any preference for the language used? So they will basically more or less, more explicitly or less explicitly kind of make a decision about which programming language they choose. They will often use it's a fairly popular modern tech stacks. So you might see them using TypeScript or React or Python, something like this. If you want to build in a specific language, you can tell it, say, hey, build me this thing in this tool stack. But that is not something you really need to worry about unless you want to. James again asking, how do you arrange and pay for the hosting? How do you configure the point of output of Replit? Yeah, set up the database. So if we just click through here, you'll see like setting up a database. Oops. Click through one of my links there. Right. Setting up a database is something that is fairly easy in all of these. So I'm just going to try and get back to my slides there. Right. So if you are in Replit, Replit has its own internal database service where you just say, hey, can you build me a database? And it will do that. If you are using one of the others, all the others connect to Supabase, which is a third-party service. Supabase has a fairly generous free tier, so you will not have a problem in terms of the volume of stuff you want to put in your database, probably. But it will shut down your database after a week of inactivity. So if you want it to be persistent, then you're going to have to pay. And then for all of those tools, they cost roughly about $20, $25 a month to, if you go beyond their free tier. So usually you can do like 4 or 5 prompts a day. And then if you want more than that, you start paying a little bit, and that's how you pay for it. So that's how you do this database stuff. Where is the code deployed? Can it be hosted in these tools itself? Yes. So we talked about that. Another question from Yadu, like, how do we port it to any other place? So also for all these tools, they all connect to GitHub. So if you want to kind of take your code anywhere else, that's very, very easy. You basically just build what you want, connect to GitHub, push it all into a repo on GitHub, and then you can pull it from GitHub wherever you want it to. Which is, again, why I say the switching cost for all these tools is like next to nothing. So don't worry too much about which tool you start with. So once you have Xiao is asking, once you have a prototype and want to get feedback on it from others, what tools do you recommend for sharing and collecting feedback? I mean, the same things you would do as a PM. I'm assuming most people on this call are PMs or kind of PM adjacent. So get it live, send the link to people via email, Slack, WhatsApp. Just call them up on the phone and ask them what they think, send them a survey, all sorts of things. I'd start with kind of like fairly low tech options of just getting a bit of feedback, ideally on a call with them, and then go from there and get more sophisticated if you want to. And Igor is then saying, so COBOL is out of scope. I don't know what COBOL is, I'm afraid. That's obviously a joke for people in the know, and I'm not in the know. So did I miss any questions? I'm too young. That is great. You've made my day. I'm too young to get a joke. No one said that for a long time. Right. So I think that's it. As I say, our Build with AI course is, we run these fairly regularly. The next one is actually kicking off in just a couple of weeks' time. And so if you want to come along and do that, I'm going to very quickly flash up the page. Right, so then you can come on Hustle Badger and look for our Build with AI course. So, it's going to be, whoops. If you click on courses, it's going to be this one right here, or it's just going to be this kind of second link down. But it's £300. I mean, just the feedback I've had on it has been like, people seem to love it. I'm very happy with it, obviously. I always really enjoy making it. So I really kind of recommend this if you want to kind of dive a little bit deeper. Um, few more questions here. Brett is saying, would you say there are tools can actually build scalable production-ready products, websites that can be monetized, or is a way to get 80% of the way there and then you need a developer? So I would say, yeah, look, if you've got a side project or an idea that you're like, oh, this is going to be my side hustle, this is going to make me a bit of money, you can absolutely build that in a combination of prototyping tools and Cursor. And you know, you probably are going to need to go into Cursor at some point. But this is going to be, depending on the complexity of your site, you could absolutely build something that you could be making money off within a few days, right? If you have the right idea. The challenge for people doing side hustles in the future is not going to be the building side, as it has been for the last 20 years. That is all going to become much, much easier. The difficulty is going to be having the right idea and distribution. How do you actually get people to hear about your idea? But yeah, I mean, if you've got idea, there's probably like a very small window now where there's going to be an explosion of micro SaaS and personal software, because so many more people will be able to code it and make it work. Yes, if you need to build, if you're looking to build a scalable website that can handle, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people like concurrently, right? Yeah, well, you're going to need some more technical knowledge for that. You're not going to get there in a few days. But if you're talking about sort of something a few hundred people can use, fairly simple functionality, yeah, that's going to be well within your range. Alejandro asking, what about a previous step about using AI to prototype UX UI and then using this as an input from Figma to any of these tools? Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways you can kind of do your workflow. So a lot of these tools, I call them prototyping tools because they are really they're really good at doing the UX and the UI. So I would almost go to them first to kind of prototype the UX UI and then use that as a handover point to designers who are working in Figma and who are going to get it pixel perfect after you've sketched out like the rough idea, or you're going to hand it over to a developer who's going to build it in a kind of more scalable way that uses all your current services and passes all your unit tests and so on. So if you're working on software that is already commercialized, you're working at a tech company already, these tools are not about adding to your current code base. These tools are much more about prototyping things really, really quickly, getting some feedback from customers, and then being able to kind of hand that over to developers really quickly because you're not giving them a PID, you're giving them a clickable prototype that shows them exactly what you want. So Yadu asking a little outside of scope, if any website can be cloned, how can we maintain confidentiality of our IP? Well, look, most websites, it's not their code that is the sort of really defensible bit, at least not the visible bits. So if you look at, booking.com, it's not the kind of the flow, it's not the booking flow that is what is defensible. It's the fact that they've done deals with, thousands and thousands of hotels, right? And the defensible bit of their IP is probably the matching algorithm, which is behind the scenes, and you're not going to be able to clone with a single prompt in Lovable. So yeah, that's kind of how it works. Brett, do they deal with SEO, getting your site seen on Google ranking? I mean, to a degree, like, if you wanted to build a site that ranked for SEO, yeah, you could build that in Lovable. You probably want to convert it over to your own custom domain so that you got the traffic for it, and you'd want to spend some time really kind of digging in with an LLM to kind of, what is your checklist for ideas and technical things that's going to mean that your website does get ranked. So this isn't something I've kind of personally done, but I don't really see any reason why you couldn't do that if you didn't want to. Okay, super. I think we're just about out of questions, so I am going to wrap up there. Thank you very much for coming along. And as I say, we'll send you a little email summary, which will have a link to this recording, but also a few helpful links, maybe to, the slides and things like that, if you are interested.